I'm Sadie, 32, sitting at my in-laws' dinner table, my stomach twisting. The clink of wine glasses and forced laughter fill the air, but I feel like an outsider. My husband Aaron leans back, his smile sharp. Then he says it a cruel jab about my worth, my past, and the table erupts in laughter. My cheeks burn, my hand clutches my mother's old locket, and I'm fighting to breathe. What do you say? When everyone turns against you. I found my voice, but what happened next stunned them all. Have you ever felt alone in a crowded room? Like if you relate and subscribe to hear how I faced that moment. The dining room felt like a stage, and I was the understudy who'd forgotten her lines. The mahogany table gleamed under the chandelier, its glow casting shadows on the faces around me. Aaron sat to my left, his crisp white shirt pressed to perfection, but his eyes had a glint I didn't recognize. Across from us, his mother Margaret sliced into her roast beef with surgical precision. Her lips pursed in that way that always made me feel like I'd already failed some unspoken test. Rachel, Aaron's sister, sat beside her, her blonde hair pulled into a sleek bun, her phone glowing faintly under the table. My stepbrother Jamie was the only familiar face, his broad shoulders hunched as he pushed mashed potatoes around his plate, avoiding everyone's gaze. I tried to focus on the food, the tender meat and buttery carrots, but my stomach churned. The locket, still warm from my grip, sat heavy against my chest, a reminder of my mom's quiet strength. I'd hoped tonight would be different, that I'd finally feel like part of Aaron's family after 4 years of marriage. But the air felt thick, like the moment before a storm breaks. Margaret cleared her throat, her fork poised in midair. Sadie. Dear, did you make anything for tonight? Her tone was polite, but the edge was unmistakable, like she already knew the answer and was waiting to pounce. I swallowed, my throat dry. I brought the apple pie, I said, nodding toward the dessert table where my homemade pie sat, its crust golden but slightly uneven. I'd spent hours rolling the dough, hoping it'd be a small win. Margaret raised an eyebrow, her gaze flicking to the pie. Oh, how quaint. Homemade, is it? I suppose that's charming? Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and a few cousins around the table exchanged glances, their lips twitching. Rachel let out a soft snort, her fingers still tapping at her phone. I forced a smile, my cheeks hot. It's my mom's recipe, I said, hoping to steer the conversation somewhere safe. She used to make it every fall. Aaron shifted beside me, his chair creaking. Yeah, Sadie's all about those simple traditions, he said, his voice light but carrying a sting. You know, from her modest roots. He leaned back, swirling his wine glass, and the table gave a collective chuckle, like they were all in on some joke I didn't get. My heart sank. Modest roots. The words hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. I glanced at Jamie, hoping for a lifeline, but he was staring at his plate, his jaw tight. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the polished floorboards and escape the weight of their eyes. Growing up, it was just me and Mom in our tiny apartment, her working late shifts at the diner to keep us afloat. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Aaron knew that. He'd held me when I cried about her passing 2 years ago. So why was he twisting it now, making it sound like a flaw? I tried to laugh it off, but my voice came out thin. Well, simple can be good, right? I said, looking around the table. Nobody met my eyes except Jamie, who gave a small nod, his knuckles white around his fork. Rachel looked up from her phone, her smirk widening. Oh, totally. It's sweet how you keep things so basic. She emphasized the last word, and another ripple of laughter followed. My chest tightened like someone had wrapped a band around my ribs. I glanced at Aaron, waiting for him to say something, anything to pull it back. But he just sipped his wine, his lips curling slightly like he was enjoying the show. I reached for my water glass, my hand unsteady. The room felt smaller, the candlelight too bright. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to fit into this family, memorizing their traditions, laughing at their stories, even when they made me feel small. I'd told myself it was worth it because Aaron loved me. But now, sitting here, I wasn't so sure. Jamie finally spoke, his voice low but steady. Sadie's pie is better than anything you'd buy, he said, looking at Margaret. You should try it. His words were a small anchor pulling me back from the edge, but Margaret just waved a hand. "Oh, Jamie, you're sweet to defend her," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "But we're used to something a bit more refined." Rachel's laugh was louder this time, and I saw her thumbs moving faster on her phone like she was sharing the moment with someone else. My pulse raced, a mix of embarrassment and anger bubbling up. I wanted to say something sharp to call out the cruelty in their words, but my throat felt locked. Instead, I pushed my chair back slightly, the scrape loud in the quiet. Aaron's hand brushed mine under the table, but it wasn't comforting, it felt like a warning. I looked at him, searching for the man I'd married, but his eyes were distant, almost cold. The locket pressed against my skin, a reminder of who I was, who I'd come from. I wasn't just the girl they were laughing at. I was my mother's daughter, raised on love and grit. But as Rachel's phone buzzed, and Margaret's gaze pinned me like a specimen, I felt the ground shifting beneath me. This wasn't just a dinner, it was a test, and I was failing. The air in the dining room turned thick, like I was breathing through a straw. My hands stayed pressed against my thighs, nails digging into my skin as I tried to hold myself together. Aaron's words calling my job unambitious still burned in my ears, and Rachel's smug, ordinary jab felt like a knife twisting deeper. The table's laughter had quieted, but their eyes were still on me, sharp and expectant like vultures circling a wounded animal. I wanted to disappear, but there was nowhere to go. Margaret set her fork down with a deliberate clink, her gaze locking onto me. "Sadie, you seem upset," she said, her voice laced with mock concern. "We're just being honest. You must know your place here." Her words were soft, but they landed like stones, each one sinking me deeper into the pit of my own doubts. A cousin Derek nodded, his eyes flicking to Aaron as if waiting for permission to pile on. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat felt like it was closing, and my chest ached with the effort to breathe. I thought of the library, the quiet stacks where I'd built a world that felt safe, where kids trusted me to guide them. But here I was, nothing a shadow in their polished world. I glanced at Jamie, hoping he'd speak again, but he was staring at his hands, his shoulders slumped like he'd already lost the fight. Rachel leaned forward, her eyes glinting with malice. "Honestly, Sadie, it's not your fault," she said, her voice dripping with fake pity. "You just don't fit with people like us. Aaron's used to a certain caliber." She gestured around the table, her diamond bracelet glinting, and a few others murmured agreement, their voices low but cutting. I felt my stomach lurch like I was falling with nothing to catch me. I looked at Aaron, my eyes pleading for him to stop this, to say they were wrong. But he leaned forward, his elbows on the table, and said, "Sadie, they're just saying what everyone's thinking. You've got to step up if you want to be part of this family." His words were calm, but they tore through me, exposing every fear I'd buried. Was this what he'd always thought, that I wasn't enough? The room spun, the faces around me blurring into a single mocking crowd. I thought of my mom, how she'd worked herself to the bone to give me a chance, how she'd told me I could be anything. But here I was, nothing but a punchline. I saw Tessa shift in her seat, her fingers twisting her napkin, but she didn't speak. Nobody did, except for Rachel, who picked up her phone again, her thumbs moving with purpose like she was documenting my unraveling. My hands shook under the table, and I pressed them against my thighs, trying to anchor myself. I wanted to grab that phone to see what she was saying, but my body felt frozen, pinned by the weight of their stares. Aaron's hand rested on the table inches from mine, but it might as well have been a mile away. Something was shifting, something I couldn't name yet, and it scared me more than the laughter. The room seemed to pulse with every heartbeat, the chandelier's light blurring at the edges of my vision. Rachel's smirk lingered, her phone now face down, but still buzzing, a quiet taunt. Aaron's dismissal echoed in my head, his calm tone slicing deeper than any shout. I wanted to grab his hand to make him see me, but my fingers stayed locked on my thighs, my nails leaving half-moon marks. The table watched me, their eyes sharp, waiting for me to crumble. Jamie's fists were still clenched, but his silence felt like another abandonment. Then Aaron spoke, his voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. "Sadie, "You've got nothing to offer," he said loud enough for the whole room to hear. "Not even a real family to bring to this table." The words landed like a thunderclap, and the table erupted in laughter harsh and unrestrained, led by Rachel's high-pitched cackle. Someone's wineglass tipped over the red liquid pooling across the white tablecloth, spreading like blood. My breath caught my vision narrowing to a pinprick. Nothing to offer. Not even a real family. The words echoed, slicing through every defense I'd built. I saw my mom's face in my mind. Her tired smile after a double shift, the way she'd braid my hair while humming old songs. She was my family, more real than anything in this room, and Aaron knew it. He knew how I'd grieved her, how I'd clung to her memory. Yet here he was, weaponizing it, turning my deepest pain into a punchline. Rachel clapped her hands, her laughter ringing out. "Oh, Aaron, that's perfect," she said, her eyes gleaming with cruel delight. "No wonder you're always so quiet, Sadie. What's there to say when you've got nothing?" The cousins joined in their chuckles, sharp and even. Margaret's lips twitched, her approval clear. Tessa looked away, her fingers shredding her napkin. But she stayed silent, complicit in her inaction. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I felt like I was drowning, the laughter pulling me under, each sound a wave crashing over me. I wanted to run, to shove my chair back and flee, but my body wouldn't move. My eyes locked on the spilled wine, its stain growing a mirror to the chaos inside me. I thought of the promise I'd made to my mom, whispered at her bedside as she slipped away. I'd never let anyone make me feel small. But here I was, shrinking under their gaze. Jamie stood his chair, scraping loudly, his face pale. "That's enough," he said, his voice shaking but firm. He looked at Aaron, then Rachel, his eyes blazing. "You don't get to talk about her like that." But Rachel just waved him off, her laugh cutting through his words like they were nothing. "Sit down, Jamie," she said. "You're embarrassing yourself." I looked at Aaron, my last hope. But he was staring at the table, his fingers drumming lightly, like this was just another dinner, another moment he could brush off. The betrayal sank deeper, a cold weight in my chest. This wasn't just a cruel joke. It was a truth he'd been holding, maybe for years. Had he always seen me this way? As nothing? My hand tightened on the locket, its clasp digging into my skin. I felt my mom's strength, her voice in my head, urging me to stand tall. But the laughter kept coming, and the room felt like it was tilting the walls, leaning in. I pushed my chair back, the sound sharp, and stood, my legs trembling. My voice was barely a whisper, but it was there, shaking but alive. "You think I have nothing?" I said, my eyes locked on Aaron. The room went quiet, their laughter faltering, and I felt the weight of every stare, waiting for what came next. My words hung in the air, fragile but sharp, and the room's sudden silence felt like a held breath. My legs shook beneath me, but I stood tall, my eyes fixed on Aaron. His face was unreadable, a mask of surprise, or maybe guilt, but he didn't speak. The spilled wine on the tablecloth glistened under the chandelier, a stark reminder of the mess this night had become. Rachel's smirk faltered, her fingers frozen on her phone, but Margaret's gaze was unrelenting, piercing through me like a needle. Then Rachel recovered, her laugh slicing through the quiet. "Oh, Sadie, don't be so dramatic," she said, her voice dripping with scorn. "You're acting like we've insulted you. We're just being honest. You don't belong here." Her words were a hammer, each one driving the nail deeper into my chest. The cousins murmured their agreement, a low hum, and I felt the room tilt like the floor was slipping away. Margaret leaned forward, her voice calm but cold. "Sadie." "Dear, it's not personal," she said, folding her hands neatly. "But Aaron deserves someone who matches his trajectory. You're sweet, but you're holding him back." Her words were clinical, like she was diagnosing a disease, and the table nodded, their faces a blur of smug certainty. My breath hitched a sob, threatening to break free, but I swallowed it down, my throat burning. I looked at Aaron, waiting for him to deny it, to say they were wrong. But he shifted in his seat, his eyes darting to Margaret, then back to me. "Sadie," he said, his voice low, almost pleading, "they're not entirely wrong. I've been carrying us. You don't push me to be better." His words were a betrayal so deep it felt like my heart stopped. The man I'd loved, the one I'd built a life with, was standing with them, not me. The room spun, the candlelight flickering like it was mocking me. I thought of the mornings I'd made his coffee, the nights I'd listened to his fears, the way I'd put my dreams on hold to support his. And now he was saying I was the weight dragging him down. Rachel's phone buzzed again and she glanced at it, her lips curling into a cruel smile. "Wow, Sadie, you're trending," she said, holding up the screen to show a group chat, my name flashing in a string of messages I couldn't read but could feel. My knees buckled, but I gripped the edge of the table, my fingers brushing the cold silverware. I wanted to scream, to throw the plates across the room, to make them feel the pain they were piling on me. But my body felt heavy, like it was made of lead. Tessa's eyes met mine for a fleeting moment, filled with something like pity, but she looked away, her silence louder than words. Jamie's face was red, his hands trembling, but he stayed rooted, like he was afraid to make it worse. The laughter started again, softer now, but it cut just as deep, each chuckle a reminder of my place in their eyes. I felt like I was shrinking, my life reduced to their cruel verdict. My mom's voice echoed in my head, telling me I was enough, but it was drowned out by the weight of their words. I stood there alone in the center of their judgment, my heart shattered, with no way to fight back and nowhere to run. My heart felt like it was splintering, each piece sharp and jagged. But something inside me shifted as I stood there, the table's silence pressing against me. Aaron's words, claiming I held him back, echoed in my skull, and Rachel's mocking phone screen burned in my vision. The room was a cage, their stares its bars, but my mom's voice broke through, soft but fierce. "Never let them make you small." I straightened my trembling legs, finding strength, and my hand fell from the locket to my purse, where my fingers brushed a folded piece of paper. I took a breath, my voice low but steady. "You think I have nothing?" I said again, my eyes sweeping the table, landing on Aaron, then Rachel, then Margaret. The silence deepened, their smirks faltering. I pulled the letter from my purse, its edges worn from being carried for weeks. It was from Lily, a shy fifth grader at the library, her handwriting uneven but earnest, thanking me for helping her find stories that made her feel seen. "This," I said, holding up the letter, my voice growing stronger, "is what I do. I help kids like Lily believe in themselves. I give them hope when no one else does." My words were calm, but they carried a fire I hadn't felt in years. Rachel's eyes narrowed, her phone forgotten, and Margaret's lips parted, but I didn't stop. My mom raised me alone, working double shifts, and she taught me that worth isn't measured by money or status. It's measured by what you give. I turned to Aaron, my chest tight, but my gaze unflinching. "I've given you everything, Aaron. I stayed up late proofreading your proposals. I kept our home together when you were too busy to care. And you call that nothing?" My voice cracked, but I didn't falter. The room was still, the air thick with tension, and I saw Tessa's eyes widen, her hands still on her shredded napkin. Jamie leaned forward, his voice breaking the quiet. "She's right," he said, his tone fierce. "Sadie's been there for everyone always. You don't get to erase that." His words were a lifeline pulling me forward, and I felt a spark of courage flare brighter. I thought of the library, the kids who'd run to me with their dog-eared books, the way Lily's letter had made me cry when I first read it. That was my worth, not their approval. I stepped away from the table, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "You don't know me," I said, my voice steady now, addressing the whole room. "You think you can define me, but you're wrong." My eyes locked on Aaron's, and for the first time I saw a flicker of doubt in his expression, his hands still on the table. Rachel's phone lay silent, her smirk gone, and Margaret's poised demeanor cracked, her fingers twitching around her wine glass. I felt my mom's strength coursing through me, her love a shield against their judgment. My hand tightened around Lily's letter, its words a reminder of who I was. I wasn't done yet. The room was watching, waiting, and I knew this moment was mine to claim. The room held its breath, every eye on me as I stood, Lily's letter trembling in my hand. The weight of their silence was different now, not mocking but uncertain, like they were seeing me for the first time. Aaron's doubt flickered stronger, his fingers still no longer drumming. Rachel's phone lay untouched, her confidence shaken. Margaret's poised mask had slipped, her eyes darting between me and Aaron. I felt the shift, a crack in their armor, but it wasn't enough. I needed to reclaim myself. I folded the letter carefully, slipping it back into my purse, but my voice didn't waver. "You think my life is small?" I said, my gaze sweeping the table, slow and deliberate. "But I've built something real. I've helped kids find their voices, just like my mom helped me find mine. That's not nothing. That's everything." My words were quiet, but they carried a strength I hadn't known I had, each one a brick rebuilding the walls they'd torn down. I turned to Aaron, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. "You say I don't push you to be better, but I've carried us both. I've cheered for you, planned for you, loved you through every doubt. And you've given me this." I gestured to the table, the spilled wine now a dark stain, a symbol of the night's wreckage. His mouth opened, but no words came, his face pale under the chandelier's glow. Tessa shifted her voice, soft but clear. "Sadie, I didn't realize," she said, her eyes meeting mine, no longer avoiding. "You're right. That letter, it's beautiful." Her words were a small spark, a sign that someone saw me, but I didn't need her validation. I needed my own. Jamie stood his chair, scraping softly, his eyes fierce with pride. "You've always been enough, Sadie," he said, his voice steady. "They don't get to decide who you are." His support anchored me, a reminder of the family I'd chosen, the one that mattered. I nodded at him, a silent thank you, feeling the strength of our shared past flood through me. I took a step toward the door, my heels clicking with purpose. "I'm not here to beg for your approval," I said, my voice calm but unyielding. "I know who I am, and I'm done letting you make me feel less." My eyes locked on Aaron's, and I saw something break in his expression, a flicker of regret, or maybe fear. But I didn't care. This wasn't about him anymore. I reached into my purse again, pulling out a small keychain, a gift from a student named Mia, shaped like a tiny book with her initials carved into it. I held it up, its metal glinting in the light. "This is from a girl who said I changed her life." I said, my voice steady. "That's what I carry. Not your judgment." I set the keychain on the table, its soft clink echoing in the quiet, a final declaration. I turned toward the door, my heart racing but my steps sure. The room was still, their faces frozen, and I felt the weight of my own power, not loud or angry, but deep and unshakable. I paused at the threshold, my hand on the doorknob, and looked back, my eyes meeting Aaron's one last time. The silence was heavy, but it was mine, and I carried it with me as I prepared to walk away. My hand rested on the doorknob, the cool metal grounding me as I stood at the threshold. The dining room was frozen, the silence so thick it felt like it could shatter. The tiny book-shaped keychain sat on the table, its glint a quiet defiance against the polished silverware. Aaron's eyes were wide, his mouth half open like he was caught in a moment he couldn't escape. Rachel's phone was still, her fingers hovering, her usual smirk replaced by a flicker of unease. Margaret's poised hands trembled slightly, her wineglass untouched. I took a breath, the air sharp in my lungs, and stepped into the hallway, the door clicking shut behind me. The sound echoed final and heavy like a chapter closing. My heels sank into the plush carpet and I leaned against the wall, my pulse racing. I'd spoken my truth, laid bare my worth, but the weight of it hadn't lifted, it had shifted, settling deep in my chest. Footsteps followed, quick and uneven. Aaron appeared, his face flushed, his tie slightly askew. "Sadie, wait," he said, his voice low, almost desperate. "I didn't mean it like that. You know I didn't." His words were soft, but they felt hollow, like a script he hadn't rehearsed. I looked at him, searching for the man who'd once held my hand through sleepless nights. But all I saw was uncertainty, his confidence stripped away. "You meant it enough to say it," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "You let them tear me apart, Aaron. You stood there and agreed." My words weren't loud, but they cut, and he flinched, his hand reaching out but stopping short. I didn't move, my back pressed against the wall, the locket still warm against my skin. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting back toward the dining room. I got caught up, he said, his voice cracking. They're my family. I didn't think it'd go this far. His apology felt like a half-truth, a bandage on a wound too deep to cover. I wanted to believe him, to see the man I'd married, but the sting of his words lingered sharp and raw. The door opened again and Tessa stepped out, her face pale, her hands twisting together. "Sadie, I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I should have said something in there. I didn't know how." Her eyes were earnest, filled with a guilt that surprised me. She glanced at Aaron, then back at me. Her shoulders hunched like she was carrying her own weight. "That letter, what you said, it hit me. I've let Margaret control me too." Her words caught me off guard, a crack in the wall I'd built against this family. I knotted my throat tight, unsure what to say. Her honesty was a small light in the darkness, but it didn't erase the pain. I looked back at Aaron, his face a mix of regret and frustration, like he was grappling with a truth he hadn't faced before. The hallway felt endless, its dim light casting long shadows. I thought of my mom, how she'd faced worse than this, and still found a way to stand tall. But standing here with Aaron's half-hearted apology and Tessa's unexpected confession, I felt the ground shift beneath me. The fight I'd started in that room wasn't over. It was spreading, changing things I couldn't yet name. My hand tightened on my purse where Lily's letter rested, a reminder of the strength I'd claimed. But the silence between us grew heavy and unresolved, and I wasn't sure what came next. The hallway's dim light flickered, casting shadows that danced across Aaron's face. Tessa's confession hung between us. Her words a fragile bridge I wasn't sure I could cross. I stood there, my back still against the wall, my purse heavy with the weight of Lily's letter. Aaron's eyes searched mine, but I didn't return his gaze. Instead, I looked past him toward the closed dining room door, where the murmur of voices had started again, low and cautious, like they were picking up the pieces I'd left behind. Tessa took a hesitant step closer, her voice soft. "I've always been afraid of Margaret," she said, her fingers twisting a loose thread on her sleeve. "But you stood up to her. To all of them." Her eyes were wide, almost pleading, like she needed me to know she saw me differently now. I nodded, my lips pressed tight, but her words didn't soothe the ache. They only made the silence louder, the gap between me and this family wider. Aaron shifted his shoes, scuffing the carpet. "Sadie, let's go home," he said, his voice quieter now, almost small. "We can talk about this. I messed up, okay? I didn't mean to hurt you." His hand reached for mine, but I pulled away, my fingers curling into a fist. His touch felt like a lie, too little too late, and the memory of his silence in that room burned too fiercely to ignore. "You didn't mean to hurt me," I said, my voice low, sharp. "You stood there while they tore me apart, Aaron. You added to it." My words were calm, but they carried the weight of every sleepless night I'd spent wondering if I was enough for him. His face fell, his shoulders slumping, but I didn't feel triumph. I felt hollow, like I'd poured everything out and had nothing left. The dining room door creaked open and Jamie stepped out, his face tight with worry. "Sadie, you okay?" he asked, his eyes flicking to Aaron, then back to me. He stood close, like he was ready to shield me, and for a moment I felt the warmth of his loyalty, the only anchor in this storm. "I'm done with them," he said, his voice low. "We don't need this." His words were firm, but his hands shook, betraying the cost of his stand. I knotted, my throat tight. "I know," I whispered, but my eyes stayed on Aaron, whose gaze dropped to the floor. The hallway felt colder now, the air heavy with unspoken truths. I thought of the life we'd built, the mornings we'd laughed over coffee, the plans we'd made. But those memories felt distant, overshadowed by the man who'd stood silent while his family dismantled me. Tessa glanced back at the dining room, her voice barely audible. "They're talking about you," she said, her eyes apologetic. "Rachel's saying you overreacted, but some of them are quiet now. I think you shook them." Her words were meant to comfort, but they only deepened the ache. I didn't want to shake them. I wanted to be seen, to be valued, not as a spectacle, but as me. I turned away, my hand still on my purse, feeling the outline of Lily's letter. It was a small thing, but it held me together, a reminder of the lives I'd touched, the purpose I'd built. Aaron's voice broke the silence, softer now. "Sadie, please, let's fix this." But his plea felt like sand slipping through my fingers, impossible to hold. I looked at him, my eyes cold, and saw the man I'd loved struggling to meet my gaze. The hallway stretched before me, its shadows long and unyielding. I felt the weight of my words, my stand settling into something new, something heavy. Jamie's hand brushed my arm, a silent promise, but the ache in my chest didn't ease. I'd spoken my truth, but the cost was sinking in, and I stood there caught in the quiet aftermath, not sure what I'd lost or what I'd gained. The night air was cool against my skin as I stepped onto the porch of my mom's old house, the one I'd inherited after she passed. The street was quiet, just the hum of crickets and the faint glow of streetlights. I sat on the worn wooden steps, the paint chipped from years of neglect, and let my hands rest on my knees. The chaos of the dinner felt like a distant storm, its thunder fading but still echoing in my bones. My purse sat beside me, Lily's letter tucked inside, a quiet reminder of the stand I'd taken. I looked out at the small front yard, the overgrown rose bushes my mom had loved, their petals scattered across the grass. This house was where I'd grown up, where we'd eaten dinners on mismatched plates, where she'd taught me to sew my own clothes when we couldn't afford new ones. It wasn't much, but it was ours, filled with memories that felt more real than anything at Aaron's family table. My fingers traced the grain of the wood beneath me, rough and familiar. I'd come here after leaving the dinner, needing a place to breathe, to think. The weight of Aaron's betrayal, Rachel's cruelty, and Margaret's judgment still pressed on me. But it was different now. I'd spoken up, claimed my worth, and that act had carved out a small space inside me, one where I could stand without shrinking. The door creaked behind me, and Jamie stepped out, his boots heavy on the porch. He sat beside me, his elbows on his knees, staring out at the same yard. "You did good tonight," he said, his voice low, steady. "I've never seen you like that. Strong." His words were simple, but they settled over me like a warm blanket, easing the ache I'd carried from that room. I smiled faintly, my eyes on the roses. "I didn't feel strong," I said. "I felt like I was falling apart." My voice was quiet, but it didn't waver. I thought of how I'd stood in that dining room, my voice shaking but unbroken, and how the silence had followed me out. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was something, proof I could face them and still be me. Jamie leaned back, his hands clasped. "You remember when we were kids, and Mom would sit out here after a long shift?" He asked, his eyes distant. She'd just stare at those roses like they held all the answers. "I think she was teaching us how to keep going." His voice caught, and I felt a pang remembering her silhouette against the dusk, her strength quiet but unyielding. I nodded, my throat tight. "She always said the hard days make you who you are," I said. I didn't get it then. I think I'm starting to now. The words felt like a confession, a truth I was only beginning to understand. That dinner had cracked me open, but standing up to them had shown me something new, a strength I'd inherited, one I'd been carrying all along. The night was still, the cricket's song a soft rhythm. I looked at the stars faint above the city glow, and felt my breathing slow. The pain was still there, sharp and real, but it wasn't all of me. I'd walked away from that table, from Aaron's silence, and found myself here on these steps where my mom's love still lingered. It was a small piece, fragile but growing, and I held on to it, letting it anchor me in the quiet. The crickets hummed on their song, weaving through the stillness of the night. Jamie sat beside me on the porch steps, his presence steady like the oak tree looming over the yard. My hands rested on the rough wood, and I felt the texture under my fingertips grounding me in this moment. The air smelled faintly of roses and damp earth, a scent that carried me back to evenings when Mom would sit here, her laughter soft despite the weight of her day. I reached into my purse, pulling out a small leather-bound notebook, its pages yellowed from time. It was Mom's one I'd found tucked away in her dresser after she passed. I hadn't opened it in years, too afraid of the ache it would bring. But tonight, sitting here, I felt ready. I flipped it open, the spine creaking, and found a page where her handwriting danced in tight, careful loops. "Sadie, you're my heart," it read. "Keep going no matter what." My eyes stung, but I didn't cry. Instead, I traced the words with my finger, feeling her love in every curve of the ink. She'd written this on a day I'd come home crying, rejected by kids at school for my secondhand clothes. She'd held me, told me my worth wasn't in what others saw. Tonight I'd faced that same rejection, but I'd stood up, spoken my truth. That was her in me, her strength carrying me forward. Jamie glanced at the notebook, his voice soft. "She'd be proud of you, you know," he said, his eyes on the stars. "For what you did tonight. For not letting them win." His words settled over me, not erasing the pain, but softening its edges like a blanket tucked around my shoulders. I nodded, closing the notebook and holding it to my chest. I think I'm starting to believe that I said my voice barely above a whisper. I thought of the dining room, the way I'd walked away, leaving their judgment behind. It wasn't about proving them wrong, it was about proving myself right. I'd spent so long trying to fit into Aaron's world, bending myself to please them, but here on these steps, I felt whole again. A breeze stirred the rose bushes, scattering a few petals across the grass. I watched them drift, small and fragile but free. I thought of Tessa's text, sent just before I left the dinner, a simple message: "Coffee soon. I want to hear more about you." It was small, but it meant something, a crack in the wall I'd always felt with Aaron's family. Maybe not all of them were against me. Maybe some could see me now. I leaned back, my head resting against the porch railing, the wood cool against my neck. The stars were brighter now, their light cutting through the city haze. I felt my breathing slow, each inhale pulling me closer to a quiet I hadn't known I could find. The hurt was still there, a bruise that would take time to fade, but I wasn't running from it anymore. I was Sadie, my mother's daughter, and I was enough. The night stretched out before me, calm and steady, and I let myself rest in it, ready for whatever came next. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow over the chipped ceramic mug in my hands. I sat at the small table in my mom's old house, now my sanctuary, the scent of fresh coffee filling the air. It had been 2 weeks since the dinner, since I'd walked away from Aaron's family and their cutting words. The sting of that night lingered, but it was softer now, like a bruise I could touch without wincing. I'd started waking up early, a new habit, to sit here and listen to the quiet, to let myself just be. Aaron and I had started counseling, a decision I'd made not for him, but for me to understand what parts of us were worth saving. Our sessions were raw, his apologies halting but earnest, admitting he'd let his family's expectations twist him into someone he didn't like. I listened, my heart guarded but open, not ready to forgive, but willing to try. Some days I saw glimpses of the man I'd fallen for, the one who'd laughed with me over late-night pizza, but others I saw the distance we'd need to cross. I'd taken to walking the neighborhood each afternoon, tracing the streets where I'd ridden my bike as a kid. The cracked sidewalks and sagging porches felt like old friends, grounding me in a way Aaron's world never had. Yesterday I'd stopped at the corner store, the one Mom used to take me to for popsicles. The cashier, an older woman named Ruth, had smiled and said I looked lighter, like I'd let go of something heavy. I didn't tell her about the dinner, but her words stayed with me, a quiet affirmation. Jamie had been over a few times, his visits a steady comfort. He'd started a small carpentry business, building bookshelves and tables in his garage, his hands always dusted with sawdust. "You gave me the push," he'd said last night, his grin wide as he showed me a photo of a cedar bench he'd finished. "Seeing you stand up to them made me think I could do something too." His pride warmed me, a reminder that my courage had rippled beyond that room. I sipped my coffee, the mug's warmth seeping into my palms. I'd started volunteering at the community center, reading to kids after school, their eager faces a mirror of the ones at my library. Last week, a girl named Ellie had shyly handed me a drawing of a book with wings, saying it was me helping stories fly. I'd pinned it to the fridge, its bright colors a small beacon in my mornings. The house felt different now, not just a memory of Mom, but a place I was making mine. I'd repainted the living room, a soft blue, the kind of color that felt like a clear sky after rain. Each brushstroke had been a choice, a step toward rebuilding myself. I wasn't whole yet, but I was moving, finding my footing in a world I'd chosen, not one I'd been forced to fit. I set the mug down, the steam curling upward, and let out a slow breath, feeling the quiet settle around me like a gentle hand. The afternoon light spilled across the community center's small reading room, where I sat cross-legged on a worn rug, a circle of kids around me. Their eyes were wide, fixed on the book in my hands, a story about a girl who found her courage in a storm. I'd chosen it for them, but really, it was for me, each word a mirror to the strength I was rediscovering. Ellie. The girl who'd drawn the book with wings leaned closer, her small hand resting on my knee like she knew I needed it. I'd started spending more time here, not just volunteering, but finding a rhythm that felt like mine. The kids didn't care about my past or Aaron's family. They cared about the stories I brought, the way I listened when they shared their own. Yesterday, a boy named Marcus had told me about his mom, how she worked nights like mine had, and I'd nodded, feeling a thread connect us across years and losses. Helping them was healing me, stitching together the pieces that night had broken. Aaron and I were still navigating counseling, our conversations like walking on thin ice. He was showing up with a vulnerability I hadn't seen in years, but I was learning to prioritize myself. I'd started journaling, filling pages with thoughts I'd never spoken, questions about who I wanted to be. One night I wrote about the dinner, not with anger, but with clarity, seeing it as a moment that forced me to choose myself. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was freedom, a release from the need to prove my worth to anyone. Tessa had kept her promise, meeting me for coffee last week. Over steaming mugs, she'd shared her own struggles, how Margaret's expectations had shaped her into someone she didn't always like. "You made me want to be braver," she said, her voice quiet but sure. Her words stayed with me, a reminder that my stand hadn't just changed me, it had planted seeds, small shifts in others I hadn't expected. I closed the book, the kids clapping softly, and I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. I'd stopped wearing Mom's locket, not because I'd let her go, but because I carried her strength inside me now. I'd given it to Ellie, slipping it into her small hands after she'd shown me another drawing, this one of a girl standing tall in a crowd. "Keep this safe," I'd told her, and her nod felt like a promise, a passing of something sacred. The lesson wasn't loud or grand. It was in the quiet choices, showing up for myself, for the kids, for the life I was building. My worth wasn't in what Aaron's family saw or didn't see. It was in the stories I told, the hands I held, the steps I took forward. I'd learned that strength isn't about winning. It's about standing in your truth, even when it hurts, and finding peace in the person you become. What moment made you realize your own strength? Share it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. If this resonated, give it a like, subscribe to hear more, and share it with someone who needs to know they're enough. Thank you for listening, for being here. Keep walking your path, and may you find peace in every step.